Hi everyone, good evening. My name is David. I have here a guest with me. This is Crystal Alba. Wave hi to the people, Krista. Hi. Welcome to Alma's CAN TV program. Alma stands for Association of Latinas Motivating Action. Before we get into details about what today's show is going to be, I just want to point out a couple things for you all. One, the number at the bottom of this screen, of your screen, you can call that number at any point of tonight's program. You are welcome to give a call, ask some questions, follow up on some information, all that good stuff. In addition to that, you're going to see our website. This is our website, www.almachicago.org. If you have any questions about our program or anything that you heard in our program, please feel free to send us an email, give us a call. Here's the information right here. Okay? Awesome. Tonight's show, we're going to talk a little bit about LGBTQ, homeless youth, and some of the barriers that they go through. And we have Crystal here, who is our Youth Development Specialist here at Howard Brown BYC Broadway Youth Center Agency, and she's going to talk to us a little bit more about that. But before we do, I do want to take a moment to say Happy Pride. It is June 1st, which is the very beginning of our Pride Month, and I just want to take a moment to acknowledge that. So, moving on. Hi, Crystal.
Hi.
Crystal, before we talk a little bit about the actual subject, can you just talk to me about, your role at BYC? What does Youth Development Specialist mean? And, what are some of the things you do with young people?
Definitely. So I started working at the Broadway Youth Center mid-March, so I'm new to the crew. My primary role there is to work the drop-in center, which is a drop-in space for any LGBTQ and homeless youth. And we offer basic needs like showers, laundry, food, and a sleeping room. We also work with other teams in our center, like the resource advocates that connect youth with any kind of housing needs that they have or work needs. But primarily, I just work the floor and meet young people and talk to young people. And
that's awesome. Can I break that down a little bit? So if I'm a young person, do I have to identify as LGBTQ to go receive these services?
No. So you do not have to identify as queer or trans, LGBTQ. Okay. We do center queer and trans identities. So it is a safe space for that community, for our community. And so any folk who does not identify as LGBTQ is just asked to respect that space.
Wow, awesome, cool. So a young person can go there, they can get their basic needs, even shower?
Yep.
Oh, wow, that's incredible. That's awesome.
And laundry. We do laundry as well.
Ooh, look at that. Save me some quarters. No. Awesome. Well, Crystal, I want to share with you, so Alma recently had an on-the-table discussion where they invited, we partnered up with Galore, and we hosted a conversation about, LGBTQ and homeless youth and some of the barriers that they go through. And we shared with some information with the young people that came to participate in that conversation. And it was some statistics that are not too old, which is, according to William Institute, 40% of homeless secured by agencies. Okay, so according to the Williams Institute, 40% of homeless serviced by agencies identifying as LGBTQ. So agencies that serve homeless youth, 40% of the youth that go to these agencies identify as LGBTQ. 43% served by drop-in centers identify as LGBTQ. And let me see. People who identify as LGBTQ are more than 2 times as likely to face homelessness than people who identify as heterosexual. So I want to take a step back and kind of process what does that mean. In your experience of working with homeless youth, specifically LGBTQ homeless youth, do these numbers shock you at all?
They do and they don't. I mean, being that our center is queer and trans centered, the majority of our young people do fall under those identities. What does shock me is the fact that I can only think of 2 other drop-in spaces, right, across the entire city who offer service centering queer and trans identities. So the fact that there's only 2 other spaces besides our own that I can think of, when the 40% of the homeless population is LGBTQ, is shocking. Because there's many other spaces that folks can go to, not many, right? But yeah.
So I want to pause by that. So there are other agencies, right? There are other agencies that service LGBTQ homeless young people, but. And we just looked at some of the numbers, and some of those statistics are showing that LGBTQ young people make up a good amount of the homeless youth population, correct? If there are other agencies that, and we're not gonna call them out, but if there are other agencies that are servicing young people who identify as homeless, but maybe not be centering around LGBTQ, why might I, a young gay male who, say I was homeless, why might I not be willing to go to that one agency that just services homeless youth and isn't centering LGBTQ? Do you get me?
Yeah, totally. I mean, one of the main things, I guess, that I hear from the young people, specifically with young trans homeless individuals, is kind of a lack of, like, respect, right, or acknowledgement, like, across the safety. So either just not being gendered correctly, so being continuously misgendered, or their identity not being respected, or having to show identification to where their legal name is not how they're known and addressed, and they may not go necessarily by that legal name, right? There's just more safety precautions that have to go around protecting our LGBTQ young people,
right?
That aren't necessarily always centered.
Got you. I respect that. Thank you. And thinking about, so we talked about like that, some of the challenges that a young, LGBTQ identifying homeless young person might face if they were just to go to any regular homeless serving agency. But what about the fact of, like, what are, in your experience of talking with your youth and working with your young people, what is bringing them to the point where they are homeless? Why is it that we have a higher population of young people who are homeless that identify as LGBTQ than, our, heterosexual population?
I think there's just added barriers, right, to survival that young folks who identify under the LGBTQ spectrum have to go through. For example, there's different mental health needs, support, family support. So a lot of young folks who aren't respected in their communities, right, or in their home, aren't necessarily going to stick around. Yeah, I think primarily that, the issues, right, around support of those identities. And also, I mean, specifically when you think of our communities, right, as Black and brown folks, like, the way our cultures are, I mean, we've lived through so much oppression throughout generations that even within our own communities, we suffer from homophobia and transphobia. And a lot of the older generations don't understand where a lot of the young people are coming from who are expressing their sexuality or their gender in a way that isn't traditional to a lot of folks. And so I think that is one of the biggest forces that is pushing our LGBTQ youth out of their homes. I mean, I myself, right, have gone through that as well, not feeling safe in the place that you call home. So you go and
I'm going to pause you for a moment, Crystal. It looks like we have a caller. Caller, go ahead.
Yes, good evening. I'm a 70-year-old Hispanic, Mexican-American, Vietnam veteran.
Okay.
And I went to fight for everybody's rights.
Okay.
Everybody. There is no difference between people. It's only people's minds that think there is. But I want to ask you a serious question.
Okay.
All the veterans that come back somehow, without a leg or an arm or something, shouldn't they be first in line for all the housing that people should get first, and then everybody else, including Alma and the rest of the people, get it. What I'm asking is, shouldn't veterans be first all the time? I really enjoyed the show. Thank you, and I'll wait for your answer.
Awesome. Thank you, caller, for your question. The caller is basically asking, if veterans, especially veterans who are suffering through war trauma, such as, possibly losing a limb of some sort, should be put at the front of the line for housing. Wow, that's a powerful question. I don't necessarily have an answer for that, only for the simple fact I don't know what services specifically are out there for veterans who are suffering through homelessness. I don't know about people being pushed to the front of the line either. I don't think I have that right to say who should be deserving of housing more than the other due to any type of circumstances. I'm more of pushing towards, and I speak for myself in this moment, I would push more towards, our government providing even more resources. I'm coming to a table saying, we don't have enough. We know that we have such a large population of homeless youth and homeless families here in Chicago. And what are our elected officials doing to address those issues? I don't know if you have anything you might want to add on that.
Yeah, totally. That is an important point that the caller did make. I didn't get to catch their name. I think that is one of the ways that the system of capitalism works, right? Divide and conquer. It limits the resources that we have so that we're pitted against each other, fighting for these resources because we all need them equally as much. And it is horrible to have to think that we have to prioritize some identities over other identities. I mean, the veteran population itself is very much lacking resources that were promised by this nation. But yeah, I think it all comes back to that. There should just be more resources in general for folks who deserve a living standard, quality of life.
Awesome. Thank you for that response, Crystal. And thank you, caller, for that call and for your question. Once again, if you have any questions or comments about our show, please feel free to call the number at the bottom of this screen. Also, don't forget that our website is www.almachicago.org. And there is our contact information as well. Feel free to shoot us an email and let us know your thoughts or follow up on more questions that you might have that we can address later on. But before our caller had called, Crystal, you were talking, we were on the subject about family acceptance, and you were even sharing a little bit about your own personal family acceptance. I don't know if you want to continue on that for a second.
Yeah, so the thought I was finishing was just myself as a young person, right? I didn't come out until I was older, I would say 20 or 21, but before that, even at the age of 16, when I came out to myself, right, in my community, it was easier for me to be outside, right, to find places to stay at than go home and have to deal with the constant questioning of, my own choices that are already, as a young person, you learning yourself and coming out is difficult enough without having to explain that to someone else when you don't understand yet. You yourself are explaining that to yourself and processing that. So it's easier to go somewhere else where you are accepted, and for different people, that looks different, right? It could be at your homie's house, it could be at another family or relative's home, and for some folks it's on the street, building your own family.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing that. I myself, I feel like I came out a little bit late, although having people in my circle who are way older than me, who identify as gay or under the LGBTQ, who will look at me and be like, I came out at like 40, I came out at like 35 or something like that. But I came out to myself at 18 years old, and I didn't come out to my family until I was about 21. And I don't really know, I do and I don't really know why I took so long to come out, but I know a lot of it came with a question of family's acceptance and if my family would accept me. and being the youngest of like 5 brothers, having a single mother who's raising a family, not wanting to add that stress. I do know, first off, I'm very blessed because my mother, she was completely supportive of me. But I do know that she has fear, even to this day, of what my sexuality means, and how others might take that, and especially when she sees in the media about individuals getting hurt due to their sexuality, right? And I think that comes with a lot of our young people's families. A lot of it is fear and uncertainty and not really sure what that means, right? I think it's really awesome that Alma is stepping up and is right now working on a family acceptance project where they have someone who is building and designing a curriculum that is helping Latino parents actually work with their children who are coming out even earlier, right? Young people are coming out at even an earlier age, and we still haven't even talked about what does that mean. But working with Latino parents on what does that mean and how can they be supportive of their child, because we know that young people's families' acceptance is going to impact so much in their life, from their education, from their mental health, from their physical health. So yeah, thank you for sharing all of that. But let's talk about a little bit about community. You talked about our community not too long ago, but let's talk a little bit about communities in Chicago, specifically, the Boys Town community and its acceptance of our young people, right? I know that Howard Brown, BYC, hosts a space for young people to come together and participate in dialogue. Is that like a weekly thing, or?
Yeah, that's a daily thing actually. So every day we have community meeting, which is a space basically for us as staff, many of who have experienced homelessness as well or identify under the LGBTQ spectrum, and young people all sit together and talk about resources in the community. We talk about issues that are affecting our community. We highlight youth art as well.
Oh, that's awesome.
So it's just an overall around. It reminds me a lot of for those folks who grew up with their families, like of hanging out around the dinner table and talking, or in the living room, right?
Yeah.
Having those pláticas together. And we do talk about some deep stuff, One of the things is concerns with the community, right?
So let's talk about that then, because BYC is what is it like? It's like at the edge, or is it? It's pretty much in Boys Town, correct?
So BYC has moved around over the past few years. The previous 2 locations were closer to what we know as Boys Town. Right now we're in Lakeview, technically.
Okay.
So we're off of Broadway and Irving Park.
Okay. So how supportive has the Boys Town Lakeview community has been for our young people? As our Black and brown LGBTQ identifying young people.
I think an important thing to consider when engaging that question, right, is the way our society works. We are rooted in a system of capitalism that values private property over human lives. And this is amplified when you throw in race, right? So people of color, specifically Black and brown communities, are especially targeted in the system where we're viewed as labor, as bodies to put in work to make money for someone else. And so I feel like when Black and brown bodies aren't doing that, it alerts the system, right? That's why police were created, right? To protect private property, not to protect people necessarily in the sense of all human beings. So when you take a center that gives service and prioritizes homeless, queer and trans lives, specifically Black and brown POC lives, in a neighborhood where there's a lot of affluent property owners, you start to get issues. People see these young identities as pieces that are taking value away from their property. So if you see young black and brown folks walking down the street, that is a warning that something is not right, because those bodies aren't meant to be walking those streets of this affluent community. And so we have people call the police on our young people. We have people targeting our young people through Facebook pages meant to, like, you know, broadcast the identities of some of these young people and criminalizing them as if these folks aren't already going through their own struggles, right? And so for us, we take a restorative justice approach. So we do not call the cops. We take every measure possible to restore a lot of the traumas that our young people have gone through before we call the police. That would be a last resort if we know that the lives of other young folks or staff are at risk. And so that's one of the issues that we face is people calling the police on our young folks, or even calling our landlord, right, to complain about these young bodies and their presence in a neighborhood like Lakeview or Boys Town, where black and brown, queer and trans identities aren't necessarily part of the community that they picture.
Wow, thank you, Crystal, for bringing a lot of that to light. And I'm glad that BYC is creating a space for young, black and brown, LGBTQ, homeless, youth to come together to share, some of those traumas with you all, and that you all have built that relationship with your youth. That's very beautiful. That's very powerful. I know we only have a couple minutes left, but I wanted to say, if you have, before we wrap this up, before we talk about anything else, let me backtrack. If you are curious about the dialogue that Crystal just shared, please know that Alma is going to be partnering up and collaborating with Howard Brown BYC in a series of art workshops that are part dialogue, part art, that are going to be exploring this dialogue, with young people, in collaboration with young people, to capture those stories with an end result of creating a mural that's going to embrace our young black and brown LGBTQ youth. If you would like, please follow Alma's Facebook page, which is Alma Chicago, where we have an event that's up. It is right here under the United Latinx Pride Week. It's going to be on June 7th. It's called We Live, Laugh, Love Here Too, Art and Dialogue, Thursday, June 7th, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., and the address is up there as well, okay? We have a pretty good turnout already building up for that, so I'm really excited. Before anything else, Crystal, do you have any final words that you might want to share? Any final thoughts? Thank you so much for sharing what you have shared and bringing so much to light. I can't wait to continue this conversation with you in a variety of spaces.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to thank you for bringing me here and sharing this space with me. I just think it's important moving through life that we consider all the humans around us, right, as our brothers and our sisters. I mean, we're all part of the same community. So that's important. I guess that's all I want to leave off with.
That's awesome. And then I personally, want to invite you to, encourage your youth to connect with us. And I would love to make our next show, in July possibly, to discuss a little bit what do we mean when we talk about traumas and how do our young people heal, and start to explore that dialogue as well, hearing from our young people themselves.
Yeah,
cool.
Definitely.
Alrighty, y'all. I have 30 seconds. Just once again, please feel free to contact us if you have any questions about our show today. Go to almachicago.org. Go to contact. Right here is our email. Check us out. Follow us on Facebook. And once again, thank you so much for listening. You are amazing. Have a happy Pride Month. Thank you.